Hello. I hope everyone can hear me. Lots of people have found the chat and are saying hello. Feel free to join in. That's all for you. My name is Monica Miller, and I'm the Marketing and Promotions Coordinator at Caitlin Press. Caitlin Press is an independent Canadian publisher located on the Sunshine Coast in British Columbia. We publish culturally significant books, including fiction, nonfiction, and poetry. And Caitlin Press is also home of Dagger Editions, an imprint for the voices of queer women identifying writers. I'd like to acknowledge the support Caitlin Press receives from the Government of Canada and the British Columbia Arts Council as a small independent publisher. Although this event is virtual, I'm located in Vancouver, which is the traditional unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh Nations. Caitlin Press is located in Half Moon Bay on the traditional territories of the Squamish, Sea-Schelt, Slimamon, and Clahoosie First Nations. And please excuse me if I didn't pronounce any of those correctly. A lot of people have already been telling us where they're joining us from in the chat, so feel free to chime in there too. Going to start with a few housekeeping notes before we get started. This is a safe space. Although it's virtual, we're not going to tolerate any hate speech or abuse of any kind. I'll be monitoring the chat once the event gets started, and I have the ability to ban any attendees who exhibit harmful or hateful behavior. So in the bottom panel of Crowdcast here, you can ask a question. If you're asking a question for a specific reader or a contributor, please add their names so I can make sure that I ask the right person. If you're just asking a general question as well, you can mention that. You can also upvote other questions. So if someone's already written the question that you really want to know, you can upvote it. And that'll tell us that a lot of people want to know the answer to this. And when we get to the question and answers, I can address those questions quickly. There's also a poll function down below. We've added 3 polls to hear your thoughts, and we'll be tweeting out the results of those after. And of course, buy the book. That's the whole point of us sharing and planning these virtual events, is to hopefully share the book with a wide audience. There's a green button on the bottom of all your screens that links to the Caitlin Press website, and you can buy the book from us. We ship all across Canada, or you can support your local independent bookseller. Many are offering delivery or online orders right now. If you're having any trouble, I noticed that a few people are having some trouble. I'll be in the chat helping out once I'm done on screen here. So I'd like to introduce Christina Myers. She's the editor of Big, and she shepherded this collection into being and had the difficult job of choosing which essays to include. Personally, reading every essay, it blew me away and I felt really seen. Christine is an award-winning newspaper journalist turned freelance writer and editor. She holds degrees in journalism and psychology from Thompson Rivers University and the University of British Columbia, respectively. She's also an alumnus of the Writers' Studio at Simon Fraser University. It's been a pleasure to work with Christina, and I'll be inviting her up to share the screen with me here. And I'll let her take it away once she joins up on the screen, and she'll let you know kind of what the plan is for the event. And
can everybody see and hear me? Maybe we can get a few sort of yes or no in the chat if people can hear me okay. Yay. Awesome. Great. Okay. So thank you so much, Monica.
I'm gonna hide my video and mute my microphone, so take it away.
We'll call for help when we need it. Thank you. First of all, thank you to Monica for the great introduction and the welcome. I just wanted to say a few quick words before we get started. Hi, it's lovely to see so many familiar names in the chat there. First of all, I want to say thank you so much to Caitlin Press for supporting this project, and for the staff there and their wonderful just amazing professionalism and support and dedication at every step. Monica, who just introduced me, she designed the cover. I just think it's so beautiful, and I love to have an opportunity to recognize her for that. So what we're going to be doing, we're going to be bringing a few of the contributors on in a little bit, each to read a short piece and then to talk about that piece, and then we'll ask some questions. A couple things to know: the pieces that they're going to be reading are not full pieces. They're quite short excerpts from their longer stories. So hopefully they're sort of cliffhangers that leave you wanting some more. The other thing is, I had someone the other day ask how I had chosen who to join me today. We do have 26 contributors in this book. And how did I choose? So, I pulled out my mom skills and I went for the fairest way I could think to do it, which was to pull names. And these were the 4 that came out of that pull. So, I can say that they're my favorites as much as every single story in the book is my favorite, depending on who I'm talking to at any given moment. And they say, oh, I loved that story. And I say, no, that was my favorite story too. And then the next day, somebody else mentions another story. And I say, yeah, that was my favorite story as well. So I think each of the stories, some of you I know have already read the book, some of you haven't. The stories in here are so diverse in tone, in voice, in story, and what they're trying to say. There's funny stories. There's sad stories. There's sort of everything in between. So I think that no matter where you're coming from, no matter what your own life experiences are, there's going to be a story in here that you go, wow, that's exactly my experience and exactly how I feel about that. And then there's going to be another story that just sort of blows you away and teaches you something brand new. Even in the process of creating this book, I learned so many things about the variety of experiences that I had maybe assumed were a little bit more homogeneous than they actually are until I did this. So that's a little bit about what we're going to do. Please keep saying in the chat where you're coming from. It's really lovely to see the spread. Of course, we were getting ready to do all sorts of events all over the place, and we can't do that. The upshot is that we get to do events like this that include people from everywhere. So to have people, one of my best friends is coming in from the East Coast. We have people on Vancouver Island. There's sort of people everywhere. And that's just really lovely to see. So that's a silver lining. We get to do it this way. We get to ask some questions. We get to sort of interact. So that's, I think, enough for me for introducing. I'm not going to be reading today, but I am going to be sort of moderating a little bit. So our first reader is going to be Layla Cameron. I'll just quickly introduce her. So in the back of the book, we do, of course, have bios of all of our writers. So before we bring Layla up to read from her piece, which I should mention, the title of her piece is Eugenics. Oh, somebody's really excited to hear from Layla. Layla Cameron is a PhD candidate in the School of Communication at Simon Fraser University. Her research interests include celebrity culture and social media, and the representation of non-normative bodies in reality television and alternative media, as seen through an intersectional feminist lens grounded in fat studies, gender studies, disability studies, and critical race studies. Layla also works as a journalist, fat activist, and documentary filmmaker. You can read more about Layla and her work at laylacameron.com. So welcome, Layla. After you've read, I'm going to have a question for you.
Okay, sounds good. Hi, everybody. And hi to everyone. Giving me shout outs on the sidebar. That's very sweet. So before I start, I just wanted to note, because you can't actually see the text, but anytime I say the word obesity or overweight or any other euphemism for fat, it's in scare quotes. So just picture those scare quotes there. All right. Okay. I don't know why I'm so nervous. I can't even see you all. All right, here we go. Eradicating fatness in the name of health reigns strong in popular opinion, despite growing evidence that suggests being fat is not life-threatening. We are all encouraged to perform good health behaviors, and collectively we now have a moral and ethical responsibility to uphold normative health standards, not only for our own well-being, but also seemingly for that of the entire population. Claims that obesity is on par with terrorism as a threat to national security, or that fat people have a significantly larger impact on the environment or use more than their fair share of resources, support the moral panic that drives anti-fat sentiments in the name of collective action and patriotism? Would an obedient bio-citizen therefore participate in these eugenics efforts? Is being fat unethical? As people begin living longer than ever before in human history, public health priorities are shifting from curing disease to preventing disease, constructing the body as a project even before we enter the world, and maintaining our anxieties about our bodies once we are here. We are a constant work in progress throughout our entire lives. The mainstream anti-obesity movement, beginning in the 1990s, the same time that I was born, labeled fatness as a disease to justify the amount of money spent on research and treatment, making it easier to access weight loss resources and interventions as they were developed. One such example is the effort to develop an inoculation against fatness, lovingly referred to as the flab jab, that aims to make people immune to gaining weight, much as we are able to make people immune to infectious diseases such as measles. I find it interesting that this medical response to fatness is contradictory to much of the medical research on the obesity epidemic. If the spread of obesity is the result of poor lifestyle choices, laziness, or the destruction of healthy food systems, then regardless of one's biological makeup, we are all at risk of becoming obese. And, hypocritically, wouldn't the flab jab or other medical weight loss interventions be not only an ineffective solution given our obesogenic environment, but also a lazy one at that? Fatness seems to resist all attempts to obliterate it. If diets worked, we would see success rates over 5%. If weight loss surgeries did not have serious complications, including fatal malnutrition, more people would go under the knife. It makes sense then that those who see being fat as a problem, as a threat, as an economic drain, would want to get rid of the problem in utero before it has a chance to infiltrate the world. Once we're here, we don't seem to go away. That's it. Oh, and now my sound's not working again.
Oh no.
Oh,
Refresh.
Okay.
And then okay, you're good. Okay. Thank you very much. It was lovely. And you did great. You don't need to be nervous. It was awesome. My question for you, I'm going to have sort of the same question for each of you after you've read. But I suspect the answers will vary a little bit. Is, generally, was it intimidating to write this? Did it feel empowering to write it? Have you got sound? Are you okay?
Yeah, no, I don't. Just
you're good. Okay.
Yeah, sorry.
I know you're accustomed to writing about this topic, but maybe from a slightly less sort of personal perspective. So in being part of this project, writing this piece, did it feel intimidating, or, what was sort of the process behind that, the emotional process behind writing it?
I was very excited about the opportunity to be included in this book, but I was very scared because it was my first time publishing creative nonfiction, which, as you said, since it's personal, it feels more vulnerable. As an academic working in fat studies, I'm used to writing about it from this removed place. And I knew right away that I wanted to write about eugenics in this conversation I'd had with my family, which also made me nervous because it involved other people. So it wasn't just my story to tell. And luckily, it allowed me to engage in more meaningful discussion about this conversation that we had had. And, obviously they supported me writing this piece because it's in the book and they're on this live cast right now.
And they're listening. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that is one of the really intimidating things often about nonfiction, is that it can involve people that we're still in relationships with, or families or whatever. So yeah, that was a particular aspect of yours that made it interesting, was that conversation with your family. So
Thanks.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for reading. I think I might have cut you off though. Did you have something else that you wanted to add before we?
I guess just like steal the opportunity to just say that one thing that made me very nervous about this essay in particular is I'm very defensive in it, and I didn't want to contribute to this like healthist attitude that fat people are healthy, fat people are active. I hope I did my own political position justice in the chapter, but just to point out.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I think, it's the opener story in this book, and that's for a reason. It's up front for a reason, because it has something really powerful to say. And, I know when people read books like this, they jump around, but I really hope that they start with that one, because it's right up front. So anyways,
thank you.
Thank you for joining us, and we'll bring you back later when we have some more questions.
Sounds good.
Awesome. Oh, right. I forgot I'm still on the screen. I forgot that I was still here. Here we go. Okay, we're going to move on. We're taking a long time. So we're going to bring up our next reader, who is Sonja Boon. And I'm going to just quickly introduce her while Monica's bringing her up on the screen. Her story is called 50 Shades of Black Fat. And Sonja Boon is an award-winning writer, researcher, and teacher. Her creative nonfiction has appeared in Geist, The Ethnic Isle, and Don't Talk to Me About Love.org, and is forthcoming in 2 edited collections, which may actually now be published. I'm not sure the timeline from when this bio went in. In 2018, she received the Marina Nemat Award for Creative Writing from the University of Toronto School of Continuing Studies. Her critical memoir, titled What the Oceans Remember, Searching for Belonging and Home, was published in September 2019 by Wilfrid Laurier University Press. So we'll let you read.
Thank you so much. I wanted to start off by saying thanks to Christina and to Caitlin Press for organizing this, because living out on the edge, on the eastern edge of the country, it was very unlikely that I'd be able to participate in any of these kinds of events. And so it's been really nice to have that opportunity. So I'm going to share a section from my essay, which it pairs an inventory of my closet. So dresses, pants, leggings, etc., all black, with flashbacks of my life. And so this is from the middle, and it starts with black cardigans. Black cardigans 4. 2 are vintage, the elbows worn smooth, shiny. You thought they were just old, but last week somebody told you that vintage can apply to things from the 80s. And what do you know? You're slowly becoming trendy again. Bonus. 1 is lumpy and faded, a little stretched out and a little gray. It's cozier than the dresses, almost. You bought the new ones online because you hate stores. Just clicked on something and typed in your credit card number. Easy. They were meant for special occasions, but you look like a disgruntled potato in them. Black and rotten. The quality sucks. But still, your size, right? At school, a girl you'll call Amanda comes rushing into French class late. Maybe she ran into a friend. Maybe the bathrooms were full. Maybe her lock got stuck. But everyone else is there already, and the only desk left is the broken one. You know it's broken because one of the sports jocks jumped away from it before it collapsed on him, and now here's Amanda, fat, out of breath, like you, only more. And everyone knows what's going to happen. You can't look away, and neither can the rest of the class, and you sink into yourself, and you can't say anything because there's a code, and if you break it, you'll become Amanda, even though you are already Amanda, and so you will yourself into Amanda's mind, and hope she gets the message, but she sits down anyway, and the desk collapses like everyone knew it would, and there's Amanda stuck in the middle, her fat body squeezing out the edges, and if this were a car, she'd need to get pulled out, jaws of life or something, but instead, she holds her shame inside, and you know, because you feel it for her. This body that is too much body, that collapses a desk that was already collapsed. And the jock laughs, because of course he can laugh. And then slowly other kids laugh too. And you don't, but you should have said something. But if you had, you'd have been laughed at too, and so you stay quiet, shamed, ashamed. And you think you might want to talk to Amanda, but you know that if it were you, you'd rather pretend it didn't happen at all. So you just mumble hi on the way out. No body is big enough to hold your shame.
Thank you so much. I don't know if you can see the comments coming up on the side, but everybody's saying the same thing. Lovely delivery and a wonderful story, and such a small section of the whole story. Your whole story is very, very powerful. And it was one of those, like, instantly, as soon as I read it, I thought, oh yeah, thank goodness this came in. I need this story in this book. Same question to you. Was writing this, submitting this, having it, going through the whole process and then knowing it was going to be on a shelf. You have a publishing history. Some of the writers in here had never written about any of these things before. Did it feel intimidating to you to participate in this, or did it feel sort of empowering after the fact? Or, tell me a little bit about that.
I don't know. Okay, I have never written about fatness and my fatness before, right? But I don't know if it felt either scary or empowering. It felt uncomfortable. But in a way, it was also very cathartic, which I don't know if that's exactly the same as empowering. There's a lot of rage and grief burbling around underneath there. It's not always visible on the surface. About the kid I could have been if fat shame heaped on me by others hadn't been such a central part of my childhood.
Yeah.
So that to me was the discomfort, but it was also really, I think, for my own self, a very necessary discomfort, because I've taught fat studies, but I think, like Layla, it's very easy to sort of remove yourself and say, yes, here's the academic stuff, here's the literature. But when you're teaching fat studies and you're a fat person, at a certain point, you have to investigate and interrogate that fatness. And this book allowed me to do that.
Awesome. Well, I'm very, very glad that you did, because I think, as I said, it's one of my favorite stories. Like every story that I read, I go, oh yeah, that's my favorite. It really is one of my favorites. And I just appreciate your willingness to share that story. And I hope that everybody gets a chance to read it. So thank you. And we'll bring you back in a minute when we get to some more questions. So thank you. This time I'm going to remember that I'm still on screen here. So we're going to go right to our next reader, who's Heather Van Mill. Hold on, I've set my book aside here a little bit. Heather, we've got our bios here. Heather Van Mill, Monica's going to be inviting her up to the screen here as I'm reading this. Heather Van Mill is a Canadian plus-size body positivity advocate and freelance writer. She empowers women to love themselves and each other at every size. Her mission is to bring big, beautiful bodies to the mainstream, inspiring them to show up and take space without apology. While her heart is split between the East and West Coasts, she currently resides in Halifax with her husband, 2 daughters, and 3 fur babies. Follow her at Heather Van Mill 1. And I think we might be having maybe a quirky moment. We might be having a little trouble getting her up on screen, so we'll wait one more second.
I have invited her, so hopefully...
Okay, we'll give it one more second and hope that it pops up. If not, we can also we'll jump to... oh, she says she's here on the side. It
says accepted and connecting.
Okay, great. We're all learning the new technology all at the same time, so I'm sure everybody's very...
I'm going to send the invite again, Heather.
Okay.
Yay!
Oh, there she is. She's
go.
up. Awesome. Okay, I'm going to let you jump right into your piece. And when you're done reading, I will come back and ask you some questions.
Okay. Hard to follow those 2 amazing ladies, but I will try and give it justice. My essay was titled Size Me Up. I have always been very size conscious. Everyone says that the numbers on the clothes mean nothing because it's so subjective. One brand size 12 is another brand size 8. Cognitively, I know that, but getting my heart on board is a whole different ballgame. There are 4 sizes that have been permanently imprinted in my brain, on my heart, and my soul. Size 4 was the size of the bridesmaid's dress that I wore at my sister's wedding. I was 14, in grade 9, and just starting to be conscious of and care about the size of my clothes. I still have that dress. Not because it's beautiful, it's definitely not. It's aubergine and has shoulder pads. I kept it to prove to myself, to someone else, to the world, I don't know, that at one point I was a size 4. In my way of thinking, it didn't matter that I was practically prepubescent, with a lot of growing left to do. It was a badge to wear. I wasn't always fat. I used to be a size 4. I'm a skinny girl in hiding. Size 16. That's been the size of my clothes for the majority of my teen and adult life. When I am active but still eating what I enjoy, this is where my body naturally rests. I'm a tall, big girl, and it makes sense. It was a difficult size to wear because many straight sizes didn't go up that high, especially not in the 90s, and many plus sizes didn't go that low. Size 10. This is the size that I was when I was 5 months pregnant with my first child. I was so ill that I vomited upwards of 20 times per day. I had lost over 30 pounds in 6 weeks. My hip bones stuck out like mountains over the valley where my baby bump should have been, and I had caverns in my collarbones. My cheekbones were defined in my previously round face, and I had a jawbone that could cut glass. My sister came for a visit and told me that I looked like a model. I was thrilled. Size 24. This is the size I am now. One size for each of the 20 years since I wore that awful size 4 bridesmaid's dress. I should be wiser now with the accumulation of years and weight. So what have I learned? That's me.
Thank you, Heather. I started to get teary while you were reading that. I think many of us...
I can't hear you, Christina.
Oh, hold on. Okay, can you hear me now? Can other people hear me?
Christina, I can hear you. Heather, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Can you hear me now?
That's so strange.
We might have to, you know what, maybe I will refresh my screen and then I'll come back in. Okay, Monica, maybe you can tell Heather
Sounds
just
good.
to hold the line for 1 second.
Everyone can hear you but me. Of course, that's weird.
Well, Heather, do you want to tell us what Christina's question was about the experience of writing for this program or for the book?
Yeah, for sure. Yes.
Oh,
yeah, I definitely
Christina's
can.
back.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, yay!
Okay. It sounds like Monica was
It's the
asking you the
Halifax
question.
Wi-Fi,
So
I tell ya.
yeah.
I was trying to fill in, but
Thank you.
probably not well.
Yeah, if she already asked, you can go ahead and answer that, and I'll say something at the end there.
So the experience of writing for the book, I kind of didn't think about it. A friend of mine shared the call out. I wrote something off and I sent it away and thought, it's never going to happen. So it doesn't really matter. And then when I got the email that I had been accepted, I went back and I reread it and I'm like, oh my God, other people are going to read this. And, you know, I talk about my sister, I talk about my mom. I'm like, I really should have thought this through a lot more.
Well, I hope they were. I hope they were accepting
they
of
loved
it.
and you know, we all had a big cry fest. I'm like, I'm so sorry if this hurt your feelings and I didn't ask, but it was like Sonja said, it was very, very cathartic and like, I'm glad I didn't write it with the idea that it would actually be published because I probably would have been a lot more censored.
Well, and I think a lot of the contributors also found that the process of writing it changed how they felt about those things, and then the period of time between writing and publishing, you just change as a human being, you know, naturally anyways. So sometimes by the time a story gets to the point of being published, you feel quite differently because now you've written about that experience and time has passed. And then people go, gosh, I have this thing that's kind of, it's permanent, stuck in history, and it's a snapshot of how you felt, but then you feel differently. So even that can feel sometimes, I think, kind of intimidating to have out there too. But I'm very, very glad that you wrote it. What I was going to say just when my sound cut out, that experience comes up in a few stories where people are very sick from pregnancy. We have a couple stories that involve sort of where people are having disordered eating, but all people see is how thin they are, and they're getting congratulations and such positive feedback for that. And behind the scenes, there's all these other, we sort of don't care what the cause is. We just go, oh, that's the greatest goal. So congrats to you. And we don't look beyond it. So even though I've read that story now, like probably 20 times or 30 times, I still got weepy when you got to that part. So thank you very much for joining us. We'll bring you back in a little bit with some more questions.
Thank you.
And thank you. Okay, so our last reader, and then we'll move on to sort of some questions, is Amanda Scriver. I hope I've pronounced Scriver correctly. I'm actually not 100% positive about that. Amanda's joining us from Toronto. She was going to be one of our readers at the Toronto event, and while I have her here, I also have to send out another thank you. She was so helpful in helping us sort of source out all sorts of information about Toronto for our event, which hopefully will happen down the road. So thank you for that too. Amanda is a freelance journalist, best known for being fat, loud, and shouty on the internet. A hard place to be fat, loud, and shouty. Her written work has appeared on Healthline, BuzzFeed, The Washington Post, Flair, The Walrus, Allure, and Playboy, among others. She finds joy in drag, reality television, bold lipstick, potato chips, in no particular order. You can follow her everywhere on the internet at Amma Scriver. Welcome.
Hi, thanks for having me. So my piece is called Navigating Radical Self-Love and Body Neutrality. I'd actually started sort of talking about this when I had a blog called Fat Girl Food Squad. And yeah, I'm just gonna start from the beginning. So this body of mine, we've been on an epic journey together. We've been through some good times and some bad times. We've had some high times and some low times. But through it all, my body has changed in ways I never thought possible. In my eyes, my body is the best she's ever looked or felt, internally and externally. I am a fat woman. I have no shame in admitting that. I have rolls and a double chin. My skin is soft and pliable. I do not have a thigh gap, and although the media everywhere keeps telling me that I need one, I don't have one. I have skin dimples in places you'll likely never expect, and scars from a skin disease I'm still embarrassed to talk about. But with all that said, I am not ashamed of this body or who I am. My body is a gift to the world, and quite frankly, I don't give a fuck what any of the trolls on the internet or people staring at me on the subway think. But I won't lie to you. I can't say it's been an easy journey, rather quite the opposite. Learning to love yourself regardless of your size is one of the most crucial and beneficial gifts you can give to yourself. But my path to self-love and self-acceptance has had every curve and bump, and it started off with a lot of self-hate and self-destruction. Like a tree planting its roots deep inside of the ground, my mom planted self-doubt inside of me. She taught me to be ashamed of myself, and she taught me that my body was a currency that I could exchange for social worth. She taught me that I couldn't be happy until I restricted myself, informing me that about all the diets I could try. I learned from her all the worst behaviors, and because of her, I was never happy with myself.
Am I still connected? Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay. Thank you so much for sharing that. I have to quickly say before I forget, anybody who's interested in expanding their social media what shows up on their feed, go follow Amanda and then follow everything she follows. The cross section of sort of fat activists and body positive and just calling things out when they see them. It's the best thing you'll do for your social media.
They don't call me fat, loud, and shouty for nothing.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm, again, like I've said with every story, I was so glad when this story came in. It was another one of those like light bulb, gotta have it in this book. And I was so glad to have it. When you wrote it, you're, I think of everyone in the book, one of the people who probably has written the most about your own body. So it felt, I don't know, a little less intimidating for you to do so. Did it feel less, was it just sort of like, yay, another opportunity to write about this? Or did it feel differently because it was book form versus, magazine or something like that? How did that go for you?
So I think the difference here was that I sort of started, like this was an idea that sort of started when I first had the blog. And there's actually a video, anybody can go and find it. It's on YouTube, where I talk about having these notebooks and talking about being Weight Watchers and writing down all of the things that I used to do. And it started from there, but then I wanted to take it a little bit deeper and talk about how the restriction and how this made me feel and how my mom made me feel. And that's sort of how it went a little bit further. I took this one idea that I started talking about and was like, okay, let's go further. And that's sort of what I submitted. And I wasn't sure where it was going to go. And I wanted to sort of talk about where my journey started and where it's ended up. Sorry, I talk a lot with my hands.
Well, I do too. That's awesome. I see somebody asking on the side, what's the name and handle? So I think everywhere, whether you're on IG or Twitter, it's at Ama, AMACSCRIVER. Yeah. And maybe there we go. Someone added it. We got some handy people there. We were going to jump next into some questions that I had here, and I had you on the list. Sorry, Monica, I'm kind of flying by the seat of my pants now. I had you on the list a little further down, but since we already have you on the screen, I'm going to actually maybe just jump ahead and ask you the question. And I think it's actually one of the kind of really timely questions. So I'm excited actually that you're already here, and then we'll just jump right into it. What I was going to talk to you about was, I think anybody who spends any time on social media right now, we're seeing so much commentary about, our sort of, your quarantine bodies. We're going to have our quarantine bodies instead of our bikini bodies. Don't open the fridge, you're just bored. A lot of commentary about, just yesterday, I saw you discussing on Twitter about something that a major US magazine had published this photo of these women. It was a historical photo of women, probably from maybe the 50s, all fat women getting out of a car, clearly having a fun time. And the tag that they had put on it was you and all your friends going out for the first time after quarantine. So I guess my question to you is, sort of what do you think about that? How do we sort of keep ourselves a little bit immune to that? How do we respond to it? Should we respond to it, or should we just step away? Like, how do you sort of, you tackle it head on, but what do you think about that urge that we're seeing for people to sort of comment and critique in that way?
So I have a lot of thoughts and feelings on this. I think the thing is that, like, obviously we make jokes when we feel uncomfortable and when we're trying to deal with a lot of things. And, like, obviously I've done stuff like that as well, and that's fine. But so often we don't realize that those jokes harm other people. Mm-hmm. So they harm people like you and me. They harm people who have eating disorders. They harm so many people, and we have to think about those things. Those jokes have implications. And I mean, there's so many things that I could say. Like, we don't want to punch down, we want to punch up. And I actually have a piece coming out about this. So I don't want to say too much, but there's a piece.
Then we'll tag it and send it out to everybody.
I wrote a whole 1,000-word piece about it that's coming out on Refinery 21 in Canada.
Okay,
so
awesome. Then we'll wait for that one, and we'll get some.
TBD, it's coming out. But yeah, okay. I have a lot of thoughts. I got very opinionated, so yeah.
And I see Monica came up on the screen. So I think we'll maybe leave that one for now. I had a question for Layla. I have a question for each one of them. Are we sort of okay for time here, I think?
Yeah, we're good for time, but
okay.
I just saw a question in the Q&A directed at Amanda.
Okay.
They want to know if your mom has read the essay, and if so, how is your relationship?
My mom and I have been estranged for several years, so yeah.
Okay. Maybe not then. Awesome. Thank you. If it's possible to can we bring Layla up, and we'll ask her a question. Thank you, Amanda. We'll bring you back if we have some more questions in a few minutes. So we'll just wait a second while we bring Layla up. I'll just follow up on what Amanda was saying. I know for me, I sort of think that I'm kind of beyond sort of being affected by those conversations that are happening right now on social media. And another writer here in BC, Jane Eaton Hamilton, I don't know if she's here today. I think I may have seen a Jane on the list. And she was talking about this particular topic, about all of this sort of fat phobia that's going on in social media. And what I said in response to that on Twitter was, yeah, I like to think that I'm sort of beyond that. And I've certainly felt the pressure from that, and had this sort of, I can feel these little sort of pinpricks of maybe I should do this, maybe I should do that, maybe I'll sort of restrict in this way or that way. So if I feel sort of impacted by that, I suspect lots of people are. So Layla, you're up. Can you hear me?
I can't hear anything. I don't know if you can hear me.
I can hear you.
Can you hear me? Okay, I can't lip read, but are you asking me the question about trolls?
Yes.
That we talked about? Okay. Yeah. Can everyone else hear me? Because I can just talk about
Before you start, I will just explain what the question is. So the question was, how do you deal with sort of negative feedback and trolls online when you sort of put yourself out there to talk about these things? How do you respond to that? So, and now we'll let Layla talk. You can go ahead.
Should I start talking? It's still not working. Okay. Okay. So from what I can remember about what we talked about with internet trolls, how do I deal with it? Because I get it a lot. I'm going to be honest. The tactic that I use most often when I'm trolled online or when I'm speaking publicly or in the media is I disassociate, because I think it is very difficult to do this work if you don't, which isn't necessarily a healthy tactic, but it's one that I have. I think that, when we think about trolls, there's two kinds, right? There's the people who comment just to be jerks and they're not actually saying anything important. And then there's this other type of troll where they might have, I wouldn't call them legitimate concerns, but they have more thoughtful or well-constructed arguments. And I do find it helpful to educate myself about what they are saying so that I can anticipate the type of backlash that my work gets. As you said in my introduction, I'm doing my PhD in reality TV. So what I want to talk about is reality TV. But I think that I could probably, apply to med school at this point with the amount of public health research I've done, because I always have to answer questions about health and whatever in order to get people to even listen to me or take me seriously. So I find trolls to be somewhat productive, but for the most part, it can be painful.
Okay, thank you. I know you still can't hear me.
Layla, can you hear me? Can you hear me,
Nope.
Layla? No? Okay.
Okay, so I think maybe what we'll do is we will bring up Sonja, if we can bring her in. And then hopefully Layla can rewatch that part later. Anyways, it all worked out. I read the question so that the audience heard it, and Layla knew what the question was because I had sent it to her, so she had it. Sonja, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, yay, we have connection. So we touched a little bit on this right after you read it, but the question I had wanted to ask you was, one of the things I loved about your piece was that it touches on this thing that so many of these unspoken rules that we have around how to behave and how to dress and that sort of thing. So, I guess I was curious about sort of your thoughts about that, how clothing can sort of symbolize so much about what kind of a woman you should be and how you should behave and sort of restrictions on that. Did you have sort of thoughts about that piece, that sort of, you can wear black because it's flattering and slimming and nothing else, and our closets are all full of black. So what did you think about that?
So the black, it's from my own experience, the black is an interesting thing because it was, one, of course, it's the flattering slimming, but two, my first degrees were in music. And so I could say it's flattering and slimming, but I need to wear it for work too. Yeah. But over the years, my closet is entirely black, right? So it's just become that way. And clothing, I just find is fraught. It's not just the clothes that are the problem. It's the change room. It's the lights. It's the mirrors. It's the person working on commission who, because they're working on commission, needs to get you to buy something, which is not their fault. It's the job's fault, right? And so it's fraught on so many levels. And there's also that sense that clothing is a sort of a measure of sort of a way that people use to discipline their bodies. So they use it as a way of get yourself bikini ready, maybe fit yourself into that skirt. And so then there's the sense that you have to earn the right to have nice clothing, right? And so then fat folks have never earned that right. They never get that reward. And so there's almost a sense about shame and shaming discourse around that they don't have the right to well-designed, to well-made, to good quality clothing, which is also part of that as well. And I could rage about this for hours. I will stop now.
Yeah. No, I think you're totally right. And I think there's also the flip side of that you haven't earned it or you haven't deserved it, is that then when somebody with sort of a non-normative body does dress really brightly or colorfully, there's sort of a commentary around that, like, oh, you're so brave. Or, I spent years wearing all black. The last sort of 5 or 6 years, I've kind of finally let myself indulge in the things that I enjoy. And don't get me wrong, any of my friends listening, I love when they say, oh, that's so great. I love that outfit. But there is also sometimes you sort of get feedback, especially from strangers, like, good for you for wearing that thing, right? So then it's like you're breaking the rules, and they're going to note that you're breaking the rules, right? So awesome. Thank you so much for that answer. And I'm going to bring Heather back up if we want to bring her up in a minute.
Actually, there is a question that Sonja said she would be interested in answering.
Oh, awesome.
Let's see. Sarah asked if there are some recommendations for supplementary reading materials, memoirs, novels, anything.
Oh, Sonja was a good one to answer that.
You had pointed that one out earlier.
Yeah, that was going to be one of my questions for her. So
exactly. And one of your questions was, would you recommend one book? And I was like, one? How much can I stop with that? If I had to choose, the first one that I would choose would be Roxane Gay's Hunger, because I think that's just such an amazing read. So if you haven't read that yet, that's the one I would put first. We also, in my fat studies class this term, we did Mona Awad's 13 Ways of Looking at a Fat Girl, which resonated with everybody in the class, made them uncomfortable in various ways, but also it was very intimate for them as well. So I recommend that. If you're looking into fat activism, I'd recommend, there's an early fat activist book by Marilyn Wan called Fat ! So ? Which is very playful and very lighthearted. And it's a bit dated now because it's like 20 years old now, but it's still a lot of fun. More updated, I would say. I can put all these on the side afterwards if people are interested. Sonia Renee Taylor's The Body is Not an Apology, which is an excellent book as well. And then for anybody who's interested in academic books, because I am, and more historical things, because I am, sorry if you get that, there's Deborah McPhail. She's an associate professor at University of Manitoba, and she wrote a book called Contours of the Nation, which looks at the relationship between fatness, citizenship, class, race, ethnicity, and gender in Canada, in the Canadian context, between 1945 and 1970. It's super interesting. So I would highly recommend that as well. But I can put all those on the side, and that's my
Yes,
bit.
please do. Please put them on the side. I actually just got The Body is Not an Apology and have just barely cracked it. And I mean, the cover alone is like, just
It's
stunning.
fabulous.
Yes,
Yeah.
it's amazing.
Yeah.
I almost ran, when you said it, I almost ran over to the dining room table to grab it. It's a beautiful cover and, just a beautiful person on the cover and the colors and everything. So awesome. Thank you. Those were great suggestions. So yeah, you can maybe add those while we're chatting to Heather next. So we'll see. Hopefully she can hear me when she comes up. While we're waiting for Heather to come up, there's another book. I think it's more academically inclined that's coming out, I think, like maybe even this month. And I want to say it's called Being Fat in Canada. I could be wrong about that. And I believe it's a researcher somewhere at a university here in Canada. So that might be another one for people who are more interested on sort of the academic side of things. Sonja had also mentioned 13 Ways of Looking at a Fat Girl. I'm embarrassed to say it was on my to be read list for sort of ages and ages. I actually have read it now, and it's I'm rereading it. Actually, it's beside my bed right now in the small little bits that I'm able to read these days, and it has been quite stunning. Maybe while we're waiting for Heather to come up, I will go quickly look right in the questions, and I'll just choose one. Oh, is she coming up? She's coming up. Yay. Okay. So I get to ask you a question. So my question that I was going to ask for you was, your piece really talks about that conflict of sort of having these days where you feel really empowered and you feel really great. And then the next day where you are not so immune to sort of everything that you're hearing. And you're like, I don't feel so great today. So how do you sort of, do you think there are things sort of around you that influence that increase it, decrease it, and especially in relation to having kids and having two little girls and thinking about how you engage with them and how you behave in front of them and what you sort of repeat in front of them. So did you have some thoughts about that?
Yeah, I mean, it really stuck to me, that old saying that, if you don't stand for anything, you'll fall for everything. And for most of my life, I've been very easily influenced, go with the trends or, gullible, whatever those kind of descriptions you want to use. That's very much been me. And it wasn't until my oldest daughter was born, and then I had a second girl as well. And I'm, thinking about how I want them to be and the characteristics I want them to have, and to not be influenced and to be so steadily rooted, that I had to figure out how to emulate that for them and how to teach that to them, which is, an ongoing and a crazy daunting task. But it really, doing it for them was for some reasons such a strong motivator, that, we don't try and banish things from our house. We're not like, I'm not going to listen to this, or I'm not going to, we don't think that's a good influence. We really use them as talking points, and to get them thinking about things. So if someone is, really offensive, those trolls online, or, scenes in movies, or, those kind of hurtful things that can come up, we use them as talking points to say, what do you think about what that person said? Did it make you have certain feelings? Do you notice that you react to it in a certain way? Would you say that to someone else? How would you feel if someone said that to you? And really use it as talking points. And that really helps me not to get sucked into it, Let's be analytical, let's be thoughtful, and, just dismiss this stuff that is nonsense.
Yeah, and I think you're quite right. And you can't to ban things outright is often very. I mean, I guess it depends on what we're talking about banning. But for example, there's been lots of commentary over the years about how there's all these really horrible characters in Harry Potter who are also really fat, and that this sort of they're unattractive looking, right? So that we've equated their size and their appearance to being sort of the evil characters. So obviously, I can't ban Harry Potter from my kids, and I love the books regardless of that piece. But it becomes a doorway to talk about those things, right? Like, have you guys noticed that like Dudley and, Crabbe and Goyle and all these characters who are sort of the not so nice characters? Same thing. We watched Goonies a little while ago. What are we saying about this character who gets caught in a freezer because he's overwhelmed by his need for ice cream? We're sort of making fun of him and he's sort of stupid, but we still enjoy the movie. So I think that's really a great way of thinking about it, is that it can open those doorways for the conversation. So thank you for answering my question. Monica, I see that there's a bunch of questions at the bottom there, and I can't, I don't want to assume. I see some upvotes. Is it okay to jump in on one of those, or?
Yeah, definitely. Actually, building off that, Tara was wondering about a lot of the books that her daughter reads have the word fat in them. And she's never sure whether it's okay that it's being owned now or whether it's still derogatory. And just wondering if anyone wanted to comment on that.
Yeah, I'll jump in on that right off. I mean, I think that there's been so much work done in the last, particularly 10 years, by a lot of people to sort of destigmatize that word. And I think that that's very important. And lots of people feel very comfortable using that word. And yet I also know lots of people who don't. And, even I've had people ask, why was the title of the book Big? To me, big felt like a word that would sort of welcome some people that might feel still, everybody's on their own sort of spectrum, right, of what words they feel comfortable with. We haven't all done that work to get to that point. And so a word like big can feel more welcoming when you're sort of further, not as far along on that trail. So in terms of a book, kids' books with the word fat, I mean, I think it really often depends on the context. Is it sort of, is it done in a way that's sort of open and accepting and sort of clear about the context, or is it being done as, it's a list of negatives, like this person is mean and they're fat and they're this and they're that? We certainly see that still in a lot of kids' books. I think what Heather was just saying about creating those as doorways to have those conversations with your kids, I think is the best thing, because it doesn't matter how much we talk about these things. These sort of things are still going to exist in the world, and the kids have to manage them. So even if you say you can't read this book, they're going to go to school and there's going to be a book at the library, or there's going to be a conversation on the playground. So I think that it's actually valuable to have media and opportunities to talk about those things, because then it sort of maybe gives them tools, I think, to go out into the world and tackle it that way. So, but again, I mean, I guess it's very, very, it really depends, right? I mean, my kids sometimes read Archie comic books and they're sometimes full of really horrendous messaging that's quite ancient. But to their credit, they'll say, this is really like sexist. Like, why do these girls like Archie? He's ridiculous. And why are they fighting with each other instead of being friends, right? So I think we can give our kids maybe more credit than we sometimes do, that they live in a different world than we did growing up, that they can see these messages and tackle them in sort of a critical way, I hope. And at least it opens conversations. So, yeah.
So we're almost out of time. And Christina, there are a few specific questions about the anthology that have come up.
Sure.
So
I'll answer quick. I'll answer them quick.
Okay, so maybe we'll say bye to Heather for now.
Okay. Thank you, Heather.
So one of the questions is, what surprised you most about the submissions you received for Big?
What surprised me most about the submissions was just the spread of experiences that were in them. That there were, I really thought that a lot of them would tackle really hard sort of sad moments and stories about sort of bullying. And then stories came in that were lighthearted, but used that lightheartedness as an entry to other things. Two that immediately come to mind. Cassie Stocks' story is about sort of fashion and sewing your own clothes. And she, tells this little thing about she's going to kidnap a fashion designer. Emily Allen's story, 10 Things I Love About Being Fat, has all sorts of funny moments, but both of them are really leading to something more serious in that humor. So I think that was probably the most surprising thing, was the diversity of sort of approach and tone. The thing that surprised me the most about the submissions that I didn't get was how many people reached out within a few weeks after the submission call went live and said, I have a story about this, I have a story about that, here's my background, can I write for you, can I do this story? And there were so many interesting little nuggets that I got in those initial emails. And then, it's a hard topic to write about. And so a lot of people said, I don't know if I can do it now. I know I reached out and I know I said I wanted to write about this thing, but actually I'm not going to. So that was maybe the bigger surprise, was how big the response was, how many people were contacting me on Twitter and here and there and had things to say. But then that fear of being read by an ex-boyfriend or being read by a parent or all sorts of things that stopped them from. So maybe the more surprising thing was the submissions that I didn't get, that the stories that I know exist out there that people were not quite ready to tell yet. So, yeah.
Yeah, there's a related question about if any of the contributors questioned whether or not they belonged in the anthology. And we do have a number of the contributors just joining the chat, and both Jen Arbo and Tara Mandarano said that they both did and do, and Tara mentioned that she was afraid she wasn't big enough.
Yeah. That was an interesting thing that came up a lot. A lot of people in initially reaching out to me would say, this is my experience. This is where I'm at. Do I sort of count? I think Tara's a great example, and I know she can't stop me. I hope she doesn't mind if I use that as an example. Sort of at that sort of size where, probably walking around in public and not being particularly uncomfortable, seats fit, other people probably not really looking at her as sort of a fat person at all. And yet internally having that experience, being at a size where sometimes it's hard to find clothing in a regular size store, but then feeling a lot of conflict about going up. And so I think that was a valid concern for her to have, was like, do I sort of qualify? To me, that was a really important story, though, because it was also about, experiencing changes to a body that couldn't be controlled, health and medical things going on, but also that experience of being in that in-between place where you feel like you're getting all these messages about your body, and you feel like you're kind of in a category, but you're not also experiencing, there's no way that somebody who's a 14 is experiencing the same sort of public pressure that somebody who's a 22 or a 24 or 26 is. And I was a little anxious about, particularly with Tara's story, will she get some pushback from that? Will she sort of get some heat? But that was an important story, and it's a really legitimate place to be. And I think a lot of readers would sort of associate with that story, because that's where a lot of readers might be coming from. And to make the book diverse, we sort of I wanted to have stories of people sort of across that size spectrum. And do experiences change across the size spectrum? Absolutely. But that doesn't mean that somebody at a sort of the upper end of sort of what we call sort of normal sizing isn't experiencing negative consequences from that. So yeah. So that's my answer to that.
Tara notes in the chat that chronic illness and a body out of your control is where I was coming from.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, and that was, again, one of those other things, these sort of invisible things. One of the things that was important about that story to me was that we make a lot of assumptions when we look at people. We see someone, we go, oh, they've gained a lot of weight. Oh, they must be lazy. Oh, they must be eating too much. They must be doing all these things. And we really dismiss the notion that there can be all sorts of other things going on. There can be new medications that have side effects. There can be stuff that's not anybody else's business, but we make assumptions about what's our business. We make assumptions about why a person's body has changed. And so that was another interesting piece about her story, was that it tackled that aspect of there are things that are out of our control, and yet then we have to exist in a world that is judging as if they're in our control. So that was an important part for me on her story.
Mm-hmm. We've got one highly voted question
Okay.
for Layla that I'm hoping that we can get her up and that she can hear us. So if not, then there's one last question for yourself that we can close out with. Sure. So Layla, I've invited you up, and maybe Maybe the trolls in the audio will not thwart us this time. Oh, hurrah! Can you hear us?
Oh no, my sound isn't working again.
Here. Oh, use my laptop. Oh, thanks.
Okay, I don't think she can hear us.
Okay. My roommate to the rescue. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
We can hear
Okay,
you.
there's a
Can you
weird
hear us?
feedback.
That's okay. It's just a
Yes,
short
I can.
question.
Okay.
Layla, do you discuss the relationship between BMI and racism? Specifically
Oh, that's a
anti-Black
really good
racism.
question. Yes, I do. In my essay, I'm going to turn this sound off. Can you still hear me if there's no feedback?
Yep,
Yeah,
that's good.
okay, great. So in my chapter, I write a lot about how trying to discover the causes of fatness is very much related to racism, as well as ableism, homophobia, and classism. Simply because, you know, eugenics movements are about trying to eradicate from the world what we would consider undesirable states of being. So any kind of marginalized community kind of fits into that that category. I think I saw the question and it asked about BMI. I don't talk about BMI specifically, but I do talk about sort of the roots of sizeism in racism, because without racist attitudes, we wouldn't have fat phobia, I don't think. Especially because, you know, fatness is very much associated with the past and with racialized communities as a way to then define or categorize whiteness and modernity. So you can't really talk about fat shame without also talking about things like racism. It just wouldn't do it justice, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you so much. I just muted Layla's mic. And we're pretty much out of time, but Christina, there's one more question that maybe you can finish with.
Sure.
What was the hardest part of making this book?
The hardest part, sort of in a personal level, was a lot of fear around how it would be received, and fear of sort of pushback and trolls and all of the things that go along with that. The hardest part, in a bigger sense, in a more real sense, was absolutely when I sent out the acceptances and the rejections. Sending out the rejections was a horrible day, and I spent pretty much the bulk of a single day writing individual emails to everybody that who had sent in submissions that couldn't be in. The stories, like across the board, everything that came in was really amazing. It was really powerful stories. It was really wonderful stories. They were vulnerable. Many of the people who submitted stories were writing about their bodies for the very first time, had seen the submission call, really went out on a limb to send something in. And sometimes the story might have been great, but if I had 2 or 3 great stories that had sort of a similar theme or a similar sort of individual writing them, I sort of had to make decisions, and it couldn't be sort of an 800-page book, right? We sort of had to make some decisions there. So that was 100% the hardest part, was telling people, thank you so much for bearing your soul. But no, because a rejection is hard for any kind of writer on any kind of topic, you know, no matter the genre. But for nonfiction in particular, and then on top of that, nonfiction, and it's about your body, and you've taken this huge leap and this huge risk to jump out of what you're accustomed to writing about. That was absolutely the hardest, because I wanted to say, please come over for tea and I can tell you why I loved your story so much, and please submit it somewhere else, and please keep writing about this. And I did invite some of the people who had contributed stories, I went back into my email and found some of the individuals who had sent in submissions that didn't end up making it into the final book. And I sent them a note to say, hey, we're doing this event today, because I feel like they're actually part of the book, in a way, and they probably don't feel that way, but to me, they feel very much like part of the book, that that courage and bravery and power that came from the contributors who were in the final version of the book existed in every single submission that came in. And that sort of bit of bravery and magic translated from their stories to my capacity to edit the book and put it together, and gave me sort of the courage to carry on working on that and trying to do the best I could with it. So that was a long answer to say that the hardest part was absolutely sending out thank you, but no. So if any of those people are online, I loved your stories. Please do publish them somewhere. So
yeah, in the chat, Evie, I hope that's how you pronounce your name, mentioned that sometimes a kind rejection letter can also be the catalyst for someone to keep writing. Just taking that first leap is so brave. And I think that that's really true in the community you've been building around the book. It's not just the contributors, it's also the readers who, like myself, I mean, if I didn't work at Caitlin Press, this is definitely a book I would have picked up. It feels so great to be seen and reading every essay, even if I couldn't identify with them specifically. It was that feeling that, you know, I think it was Sonja mentioned it, that feeling of shame, you know, or that another feeling that someone expressed. And I think that building a community is really what you've done well with this book.
Thank you so much. And just before we close, I just want to say the for anybody who doesn't have a copy of the book, the dedication at the front is to the writers in the book, thanking them for being, I think I said, bold and brave and full of magic. And, you know, before we say goodbye, I just want to say thank you to the contributors for being here. You are bold and brave and full of magic. And I really hope and believe that people reading the book will feel themselves bolder and braver and full of their own magic, I hope, when they read it. So thank you, everybody, for joining us. Thank you so much, Monica, for shepherding us through this new technology that we're all still sort of learning. And I know we had a few hiccups along the way, and thank you for being patient with us, everybody who's online. And yeah, feel free to poke us. We're kind of all on Twitter. Caitlin Press is on Twitter. I'm on Twitter. If you want some help connecting with a local bookstore that can get you a copy real quick, or if you have more questions or anything at all, we're kind of all out there. So yeah, thank you so much, everybody. Thank you, contributors, and hopefully we'll talk soon.